until he met my mother and left for the military. I have never seen two women cry as much as Sama and Nuria the day that my father was buried. And I will never forget that day. I will never forget the sound of the dirt falling upon his coffin. I have never heard anything like it. If death sounds like anything, this is the sound, a dry and empty knock of earth on wood.
Mimi and Yijeno's grandmother died very young, during the Great Famine of the 70s. During that time, the drought killed hundreds of thousands of people. Some died of malnutrition, and others, like the mother of Sama and Nuria, of an epidemic caused by the accumulation of cadavers in the streets. Ethiopia is a rich country, and this should never have happened. It happened during the final years of Emperor Haile Selassie's reign. The harvest suffered from the drought, and speculators hoarded grain to provoke higher prices. It got out of hand, and the emperor did nothing to stop it. Shortly afterwards, the communists seized power and ended the reign of more than 1,000 years of Ethiopian kings. Lake Tana is the largest lake in Ethiopia and one of the most important geographic landmarks on the planet. The Blue Nile, one of the arms of the mother of all rivers, emerges from its basin. This is one of the first places that the abbot from the monastery asked Yijeno to visit. There are 36 islands on the lake. 20 of them are inhabited by monks, who are the guardians of the churches and monasteries, some of which date from as far back as the 13th century. Women are not allowed to enter. Yijeno wants to visit the Kebran Gabriel monastery. To get there, he must get a papyrus canoe. They cannot be rented. He has to buy one. They are single-use canoes and are very cheap. They are the same papyrus boats used along the Nile since the times of the pharaohs. The fishermen of the area use these canoes to capture species like the Nile perch. The canoes last for 2 months, and then they are discarded. In 1770, the Scottish explorer James Bruce declared himself the official discoverer of the sources of the Nile, branding Pedro Páez, as well as other Jesuits who saw the Nile before him, as impostors. Today, there is no doubt that Páez was the first European to write about the lake, knowing the geographic importance of this spot. He went there accompanied by the Emperor Síguenos, and in his book he wrote, "I do not feel capable of expressing what I feel while observing what Cyrus, Alexander, and Julius Caesar so desired to see." From Lake Tana, the Blue Nile tackles a slope of more than 2,000 meters until reaching the plains of Sudan. There, in Sudan, it joins the White Nile, and from there they flow together until falling into the Mediterranean Sea. There are 1,450 kilometers to Hurtan, crossing gigantic slopes. The lake is considered the source of the Blue Nile, but in reality it comes from the small Lake Abe and the thousands of streams that feed the Tana. The Kebran Gabriel monastery, built in the 17th century, is found at the highest part of the island and is surrounded by a stone wall. The church has a circular structure, very typical of Ethiopian traditional design, in which the walls are made of mud and compacted with straw. The origin of these monasteries in the middle of the lake goes back to the historical intention to hide the works of art from the enemies of Orthodox Christianity. From the beginning, it was proved that Lake Tana was a safe place, and little by little, not only the treasures of the church, but the tombs and jewels of the crown found safe refuge here. And as in all the churches of Ethiopia, mural paintings occupy a place of honor. They are colorful, vibrant, and difficult to interpret for the non-Orthodox. Their objective is, just as with Gothic painting, to teach the uneducated about the lives of biblical characters, a mythicized and reinterpreted life in a literary manner. Life at Kebran Gabriel is peaceful, and most of the monks spend years here without ever leaving. Abba Hali Mariam, a monk who resided here until he was 90, spent 25 years here without finding a reason to leave. Wrapped in his white cloak, he could be seen for hours on end sitting next to a stone or meditating under a tree. His only worry, like all the monks at Kebran Gabriel, was not to contradict the ways of God. When there are no ceremonies, the monks of Kebran Gabriel work in the gardens of the monastery, where they get most of their sustenance. The novices do leave the island and sometimes go to the nearby town of Bahar Dar, where they purchase the things that the earth does not provide. Kebran Gabriel, like most of the Ethiopian churches, keeps a replica of the Ark of the Covenant, the chest in which Moses kept the tablets of the law. According to legend, the Queen of Sheba was from Ethiopia, and after a trip to Jerusalem, she became pregnant by King Solomon. Her son, Menelik I, founder of the dynasty that remained in power until the 20th century, also traveled to Jerusalem. He lived with his father for a few years, and when he returned, he brought the precious treasure with him. Since then, they say the Ark of the Covenant is found in Aksum, near the border with Eritrea. Once a year, they bring it out in procession. No one can see it. It's covered by a cloth and is guarded again without really knowing for certain what is found inside.
The death of my father meant a big change for everyone. He never spent a lot of time at home, but his presence was constant. We always talked about him, of the stories that he told us when we were younger,